Our guest speaker today is Sue Witter, and she has been involved in Science of Mind and New Thought for more than 35 years, and she is now serving the West Valley Center for Spiritual Living in Peoria. She is passionate about learning and teaching spiritual principles. She's been studying spirituality, world religions, the science of spirituality, psychology, sociology, and philosophy for many years from many different teachers. She describes the principles of science of mind as the fulcrum of her spiritual growth and development. Please join me in welcoming Sue Witter.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for having me. It's a delight to be back. I was here about a year ago, and there are a lot of faces in the room that I know. I haven't seen Tom for a long time. Tom Rose and I met when I go to Lake Havasu once a month and do their service because their minister is part-time, and so we have known each other for a long time. 15 years probably I've been going there. So it's a treat to be back, and I thank you very, very much for having me. So I like to often start a talk or a sermon or whatever you want to call it with a Buddhist tradition called rousing bodhicitta. And rousing bodhicitta is a process where you dedicate the teaching for this day to the greater good for all concerned. And bodhicitta is that wisdom, awakening mind, an open heart. And so what I'd like to do for just a moment is everyone to just stop, take a breath, and commit to having every thought go forward into that collective consciousness to send healing to the world. Thank you. So I do that a lot because, we're in kind of a turbulent time in life, and there's a lot going on that cause us to see other, to look at the other outside of us. And I love this philosophy because it focuses on connectedness. It focuses on oneness. It focuses on what we have in common, which is really, truthfully, everything. When you step away and look, we are more alike than we will ever be different, according to Maya Angelou and many others. So I love the fact that your yearly theme this year has been celebrating spiritual awakening. Now at our center, we've been talking about what matters most, and that's also a form of celebrating spiritual awakening. And I like to know what's been going on before I come and talk somewhere. So I watched all of November. You had the just absolutely delightful good fortune to have Reverend Leslie and Reverend Karen talking about in October and November that beautiful giving and receiving, that harmony. And it is, they talked about acceptance, gratitude, and authenticity, and the deeper yes commitment. And I will tell you that I believe having a commitment to spiritual principles and a spiritual practice is indeed what brings peace to us and to the world. So this month, I understand, we're starting off the month with a theme of peace. And that's a beautiful theme for the holiday season. And the book, Peace is Every Breath by Thich Nhat Hahn, is an extraordinarily beautiful book. It's almost poetic at times. So please do enjoy that. Take time with that. Sort of allow yourself to steep in it, because it's the kind of book that you do read and allow yourself to just kind of wiggle in. But the poet Kabir, who is a couple centuries after Hafiz, which many of us know, asks the question, what is God? And then he answers his own question. God is the breath inside the breath. God is the breath inside the breath. Every breath we take, God is the breath inside of our breath. So as you go forward and look at the Thich Nhat Hanh book, allow his talk of the breath to really connect to that God is the breath inside the breath. So Ernest Holmes, I'm going to start with an Ernest Holmes quote, and I love the archives. So I don't know if you know about this, but the Science of Mind archives is if you are a nerd, if you're a Science of Mind nerd, I am, that you can become a member of the Science of Mind archives, and they have all kinds of things that they've found and compiled that you can't buy at a bookstore, and you can't download them to your e-reader. It's awesome. So this is one that I haven't found anywhere else other than there, and it's Holmes's Reader for All Seasons. The attitudes of praise and thanksgiving not only lighten the consciousness, lifting it out of sadness and depression, they elevate consciousness to a point of acceptance. Praise and thanksgiving are affirmations of the divine presence, the divine abundance, and the divine givingness. The attitudes of praise and thanksgiving elevate our consciousness to the point of acceptance. And for me, those three things, not only are they an integral part of the giving and receiving that y'all talked about last month, but they are the sort of the cornerstones of peace. So it gives you a good basis for the holidays, and I will ask you one thing as you go forward through this holiday season. The holidays, for some of us, are really fun. They're filled with love and joy and laughter and connection. We get together, we break bread, all of those sorts of things that bring certain people joy. There's some of us that are neutral. It just kind of shows up every year, and we wander through it. I don't know if you're one of those people, but I have been in my life. And then there are those that are just kind of resigned. It shows up once a year whether I want to or not. And there are those of us that are challenged. So I will raise my hand and say I'm one that's challenged, and I have hopefully gotten to the point where I don't rain that on everyone's parade. Although some might tell you that I still do, but I try hard not to. So in this time where there's this combination of great joy for giving and receiving, and love and connection and happiness, acknowledge that there's also people who are going through this time that's challenging, where there's darkness in the world. It's the darkest time of our year. For some people, it's stressful, or for some people like me, it has to do with obligation. And if you know me at all, you will know that I come from the family where obligation is king. Absolute king. And so for me, it's a joy to be able to live that in a different way. But my ask for everyone is to take the holidays with a light heart, with a sense of peace and love, and allow each of us to navigate this process in our own way. And so whenever I start the month of December, that's always my ask. It's my ask of myself and everyone, that it's a peaceful, loving, and kind thing to just honor always where we are, because each of us come from a different place. So here's another Ernest Holmes quote, and it is from How to Use the Power, 20 Practical Lessons for Creating a Balanced Life. We must come to believe that this thing called life desires only that which is good for us. This is all it has ever planned. All of these things that have so unhappily been lodged in our minds were put there by fear, ignorance, and doubt. This fear and uncertainty that has so burdened us and has been based on the lack of realization that everyone has a silent partner who accompanies them through life. And to me, that knowledge that God wants only the best for me, that God wants only the best for all of us, that the universe conspires to bring us our good, that is something that in times of challenge, it's extraordinary to be able to fall back into, and in times of grace and gratitude, it is something to rejoice over. And for me, it's kind of, again, we're looking at the cornerstones. What are the basis things of peace? So you talked about this thing called You being your favorite book. I think most practitioners and ministers, if you had to pin them down, would say one of your favorite books, potentially of all times, is this thing called You. But I will tell you my next favorite one that's not Ernest Holmes is a book by Eric Butterworth, and it's called In the Flow of Life. It is an extraordinary book that talks about the flow of good in our lives, in every aspect of our life. And he says over and over and over that life is lived from within out, from inside out. And the affirmation that he uses over and over is, be still and know I am in the flow. Will you say that with me? Be still and know that I am in the flow. When we know that we are in the flow, it is absolutely a place where peace abounds. Be still and know that I am in the flow. So when I tackle things, when I do research, and people will laugh at me and occasionally say, you have gone down the rabbit hole of research, Sue, and you need to pull yourself back. You need to pull yourself back quickly. But I always start with definitions. So the simple English Wiktionary definition is, peace is a time without any fights or wars. In the larger sense, peace or peacefulness can mean a state of harmony, quiet, or calm that is not disturbed by anything at all, like a still pond with no ripples. Now, Pema Chodron talks about, she has a beautiful way that she describes peace, and that is, the definition is, it's the place where we soften what's rigid inside of us. We soften our hearts. If I have a soft heart, an open heart, I am far more willing to look at other people, look at myself, look at the world from a kind and caring, compassionate way. Father Greg Boyle is a Jesuit priest who is, he runs Homeboy Industries. Have any of you heard of Homeboy Industries? I love Homeboy Industries. It is astounding. It is the largest reentry program for people coming and retraining program for people getting out of prison and who want an avenue out of gangs. It is absolutely extraordinary. And so every Christmas, the only thing, if you ever get a Christmas gift from me, I promise you it will be from Homeboy Industries. It'll be a coffee mug or a purse or something. But anyway, Father Boyle is someone that you'll hear talking a lot about this day, because he really has a commitment to a life of peace. And whenever I'm studying a subject, I like to look and say, who can I hold as my shining light? Who can I hold as someone who, when I think about them or when I see them or when I see anything that triggers them, I can go, oh yeah, that's the truth. That person holds that light of truth for me when I forget, because we all do at times. We all forget. So generally, peace is classified in two general categories. Internal, that's how we operate inside, how we feel, how we think. It's peace of the mind and peace in the soul. Or the external is peace with people, with places, with things, with circumstances. But in my rabbit hole, I found a delightful minister who I took a lot of the fundamentalism out, but he defines it in 4 different ways, 4 different types of peace. Peace of God or peace with God. And Ernest Holmes' dictionary, another thing, so the glossary, do y'all know the glossary in the Science of Mind textbook? The coolest part of the book. Absolutely the coolest part of the book. You have a question? Go to the glossary. It's there. Anyway, in the glossary's definition for peace is a state of inner calm, an inner calm so complete that nothing can disturb it. The peace which comes from the knowledge that it is all. Fathomless peace is meant by the peace of the Spirit. This is the peace to which Jesus referred when he said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you." The infinite is always at peace because there is nothing to disturb it. A realization of our oneness with omnipresence brings peace, the peace which is accompanied by a consciousness of power. And there's a Bible verse that talks about the peace that passes all understanding. And for me, that's what this is. Peace that passes all understanding is so big that for me, it's kind of at times hard to wrap my mind around, other than to say, really, truly, my definition of God is infinity. It's infinite. It is greater than my human mind can comprehend. And so over the years, I've stopped trying to put it in a box. So even though I'm going to talk a lot about God today, it really is that infinite source, that infinite love, that infinite peace that passes all understanding. So the second kind of peace that they referred to was peace with the universe. Now, we in Science of Mind do a pretty good job with that, right? We have no doubt that the universe is unfolding as it should. We have no doubt that we are always at choice, and that every choice we make can take us, that the universe is like a GPS that's constantly correcting for us and guiding us. Even if we've gone this way, it gives you one of those, stop, go 200 feet, turn left, and go north, or whatever it is. So it's that constant correction, and I think that for me, that's what peace with the universe is about. It's trusting that divine wisdom, trusting that peace that passes all understanding, to be that guiding force. So now we'll get into the two that are slightly harder. Peace within yourself. So Father Greg Boyle talks about the fact that we absolutely create our world based on how we see our world. How we see ourselves first, then determines how we see our world. And that determines then how we behave in it. So being able to come to a place of peace and knowing the truth of who you are is where peace inside of each individual comes. How we see ourselves is how we live in the world. And that, for me, also creates that opportunity to truly look at the truth of who I am. Jesus says you're the light of the world. He doesn't say, if you're good enough, if you behave well, if you cross your T's and you dot your I's, if you really work hard, then you'll be the light of the world. Maybe. No. Jesus said, you are the light. You are the light. There's no maybe there. And so for me, looking at those times when I need to open my heart and open my soul, that is a part of the process. To be able to say, I am the light, and it is absolutely unconditional. Brene Brown talks a lot about that worthiness. And in a quote of hers, she says, wholehearted living is about engaging with our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and what does not get done, I am enough. It's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I'm imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that does not change the truth that I'm also brave, worthy of love and belonging. That is because we are the light. It is that truth that is unshakable, immovable. And so, as we look at this process of figuring out how to come to peace within ourselves, about ourselves, I think a part of it, a really essential part of it, is kinship. It's community. It's a part of why we're here today. That there is something magic about coming together in community that allows us to feel that sense of love and belonging. So I honor each and every one of you who has taken time out of a busy life to come here and honor the truth of who you are. And Greg Boyle talks about it as radical kinship. That radical kinship is that which heals, that which brings love to a new place. So there's a there's a great book called Ask Yourself This by Wendy Craig Purcell. Does anybody know that book? Love that book. Love that book. If you are a journaler, it's a great book because it's just a bunch of questions. And she breaks them down into categories. And one of my favorite ones is, how big is your God? How big is your God? Followed by the question, and how long do you give God to work it out? Seconds, some days, right? Some days think the thought, okay, God, oh, by the way. So how big is your God? How big is your God? And Greg Boyle's, is very, if you have not seen any of his stuff, go to YouTube and look. He's there. He tells stories that make you laugh, that make you gasp with almost horror, and some that make you cry because of the community that he works with. But he says, God can get tiny if we're not careful. Right? God can get tiny if we're not careful. He has a book called Barking to the Choir, and it's because the homeboys apparently mix up sayings. So rather than barking up the wrong tree and preaching to the choir, it was barking to the choir. And he went, that's a perfect title for a book. So, but he talks about the fact that as humans we're settlers, and not as pioneers, but people that are human occupational hazard is that we settle for a small God. We settle for less. We settle if we come from that Christian tradition of a harsh and punishing God. And his advice is to not settle. To not settle for a small God. To settle for God is to limit everything. And so he asks, how much greater is the God that we have as opposed to the one that we think we have? Right? As opposed to the one we think we have. So, and Meister Eckhart says, and something that I may cry, there are certain, as I watched the prior ones, I was grateful that Reverend Karen her heart was touched enough to tear up a little bit. So if that happens, bear with me. But Meister Eckhart says, it is a lie, any talk of God that does not comfort you. It is a lie, any talk of God that does not comfort you. That's peace, right? So living in peace can be compared to the petals of a flower unfolding into the morning sunlight. The petals of peace unfold in our life. So now we come to the difficult one. It's really, really easy to be peaceful that are like us, who think like we do, who act like we do, who believe what we believe. It's really easy if we know that to be true about them, that if they're grumpy, if you are like me, some days I put on my grumpy pants. It's a little hard to get them off some days, others not too bad. But when we have that connection and sameness, it's pretty easy to see others in a different way. So peace with others is a relational peace. And it challenges us to look at life a little differently. It challenges us to see the oneness, to see that we are all the same. Pema Chodron refers to the process of hardening our hearts with a fundamentalist mind, and that peace is when we have hardened our heart, or the absence of peace is when we've hardened our hearts. So that process of softening our hearts to other people who aren't like us. And it's creating other, right? In the dictionary, when you look up the definitions of others, it includes words like not included, not the same. I love this one, very true. Disturbing or threateningly different. Disturbing or threateningly different. A thing opposite to or excluded by something else. and one considered by members of a dominant group as alien, exotic, threatening, or inferior. Ladies and gentlemen, judgment separates us. And we are hardwired. Truthfully, our brain is hardwired to judge. Our brain is hardwired to look around and say, what could possibly be a threat, and what do I need to do to protect myself from it? And once I learned that, it was a little easier for me to be kind to myself, because I could say, oh, my brain is being my brain, right? It's busy looking around going, are you a good guy or are you a bad guy? Are you safe or not safe? That's what we're hardwired to do. And so being able to know that gives us the opportunity to make a new choice, which is what's essential when you look at the process of having peace with others. So there's a great quote from Mother Teresa: if we have no peace, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. We've forgotten we belong to each other. And there's, so back in the day when in Ireland they were busy trying to kill each other, in theory they said it was in the name of religion. It was really politics. They used religion as the shield. So in a school in northern Belfast, there was a Time magazine article in 2001, and there's a plaque on the door entering the school that says, if we were born where they were born, if we were raised the way they were raised, if we learned what they learned, we would be just like them. The ability to stand back and look for those things that are the same, and to understand that our differences are really that process of being taught what they're taught and live where they lived and believe what they believed. That's how it happens. And so the process of being able to open our hearts wide enough to be able to see others. Now, it doesn't mean that it's okay, right? There's still a lot of behaviors not okay. Absolutely not okay. But it's the ability to believe that people are doing the best they can with what they have to work with because of how they were raised, what they were taught, that determined how they believed, which determined how they see the world. So it's about learning to see us from a different perspective. So there is the last Father Boyle quote that I'll use. And if you bring that one up, he talks a lot about what his work is to bring people back to the truth of who they are. And here's where I'll cry. Oh, nobly born, here we go. Oh, nobly born, remember who you are. You are innately, thoroughly, and unshakably good. Oh, nobly born, remember who you are. Remember who you are. You are innately, thoroughly, and unshakably good. And there is nothing that can take that away. So I will ask you to really look at your life and see where we create other. Because everyone wants peace. We just have a different idea of what peace looks like, and we have a different idea how to get there. But we all want that. And it's easy to love people who are obviously being victimized. It is much harder to create a space for the victimizer. It's a very hard thing to do. Long ago, I don't know, probably 20 years ago, there was a shooting in a Quaker community. And they are by far the most forgiving people I have ever dealt with. We get a Quaker magazine at home. It's beautiful. But they said, we will not accept help from anyone unless you also help the family of this boy who shot our people, and who was killed. Because they suffer too. We have to be able to see past behavior, still hold people accountable for their behavior, right? But to see past it, to see past and make space. Pema Chodron all the time talks about making space to dismantle barriers. So I'm going to go back to that. It is a lie, any talk of God that does not comfort you. There is no us and them. There is just us. And if we want peace in the world, we need to be able to take a stand for what we know, for what we believe, for what is right. To do things like serve people on Thanksgiving Day, or bring clothes, or whatever it may be. To serve them at that level. Because when we stand on the margins are erased. It's about seeing the God in everyone. So as we go forward into this holiday season, remember, peace can be compared to petals of unfolding petals on a flower. It's a process. Nobody has it down day by day. Sometimes it's minute by minute, sometimes it's hour by hour. But we all are human. It's giving ourselves our humanness and remembering, oh, nobly born, remember who you are. You are innately, thoroughly, and unshakably good. So as we move forward, please do that. Look for the place where we are unshakably good. Not just those who are like us, but those who are unlike us. And that will give us that peace with others. When we can do that hardest one, it brings it all into a beautiful package. So I'm going to end with asking everyone, I asked you to hold an intention as we begin. And then at the end of a teaching, the Buddhists do what's called dedication of merit. And a dedication of merit is a beautiful thing because it says, through this merit may all beings be awakened. For the benefit of beings without exception, I dedicate without any reticence whatsoever, and that all merit accrued through this virtuous act it allows us to radically imagine that all beings are free, at peace, and awakened. So I'd like to now take this time to anchor this in prayer. And if we would have the ministers, practitioners, their ministers in training, all of you to come forward and to hold this truth as we anchor in prayer. So right here, right now, in the presence and the activity of Spirit, that is indeed pure peace, pure love, joy, happiness, harmony, understanding, wisdom, clarity, and oh, so very much more. I know that all of those qualities of the divine live and move and have their being in, through, and as me, in, through, and as you, in, through, and as everyone, everywhere. People who are like us and people who are not like us. That we all are absolutely one with the divine. We all possess those beautiful characteristics. So as we move forward with this month of looking at peace, we remember that peace really is within us. It is about remembering the truth of who we are. And so I know that as we go forward, that there will be times, the intention is to have times that allow us to just stop, to breathe, to open, to remember that we are thoroughly and unshakably good. So I give thanks for this beautiful group of people who have come here today to feel the connection of the divine in, through, and as each one of us. I give thanks knowing that every moment we spend knowing the truth of who we are, it expands out into the world to the point that it overflows. So I know with that joyful, grateful heart that we release this to the synchronicity of both love and law, that indeed always says yes. And so we release it with a sense of excitement, enthusiasm, and expectancy of good, good, and more good. And we affirm this together by saying, and so it is.